The first thing Wyatt Calder noticed about Junie Hollister wasn't her fine Eastern riding clothes. It wasn't the little flat saddle she rode, the kind they used back east, or the way her golden hair was pinned up in neat braids like she'd stepped out of a painting in a city parlor. It was the way she looked at people, like she was hungry for someone to look back. He saw it the very first week he hired on at Dry Hollow Ranch. She rode out to the corral one cool morning, sitting straight and careful on that strange little saddle, and three of the older hands stopped what they were doing just to watch her pass, not with admiration, with smirks they didn't even bother to hide. "There goes the dude girl," one of them muttered, loud enough to carry. "Can't even sit a real saddle. Spends her daddy's money on perfume and pretty ribbons while the rest of us break our backs." Another one chuckled. "Heard she takes a bath every single day." Every day, like the dust offends her. Wyatt said nothing. He kept oiling the bridle in his hands and watched her from under the brim of his battered hat. He watched her shoulders, and he saw what the others were too dull to see. The way she lifted her chin a little higher as she rode past, the way a person does when they've heard the words 100 times, and decided, by sheer will, not to let them land. And underneath that proud chin, just for a second, he saw the flicker. The hurt she was too stubborn to show. She rode on toward the open range, sitting tall, alone. That was the day Wyatt Calder decided that Junie Hollister was the loneliest person on that whole ranch. And she lived in her own father's house. Amos Hollister was a hard, weathered old man with a gray mustache that drooped past his chin and a temper that had only soured with the years. He'd buried his wife a long while back, and when his only daughter went away east to school, something in him had gone bitter and tight, like rawhide left too long in the sun. He stood out by the bunkhouse that evening, talking low and angry to his foreman, not knowing the new hand was lying on his bunk just inside the open window, hearing every word. "It ain't bearable, Tobias," Amos was saying, pulling at the drooping ends of his mustache. "She comes home from that fancy Eastern school with her nose pointed at the sky, wears perfume that'd choke a mule, rides around in them little skimpy duds that's a shame to the nation. Calls that postage stamp saddle she straddles a real saddle." He shook his head. If she'd come back with a brain in her head, or with some honest, orderly sense, even a few wild scrapes I could forgive. But she came back a stranger to me, Tobias, a perfumed stranger. Tobias Reed, the foreman, was a stocky, steady man who didn't waste words and didn't rile easy. He glanced toward the bunkhouse window before he answered, lowering his voice. "Maybe she's just a mite homesick, Amos. 4 years is a long time to be gone. Give her a little while to find her feet again." "Time?" Amos barked, and then caught himself and dropped his voice. "We ain't got time, man. The Dry Hollow's near busted, and you know it. The cattle drives this year barely covered the feed. Leif Skinner's holding that mortgage on us like a buzzard sitting on a fence post, just waiting for us to fall over." He paused, and his old eyes went darker. "And now there's this Mossvale fella, Cyrus Mossvale. Comes riding over from his place in his pressed shirts on his blooded horse, all slicked up and smiling like a cat in a creamery, courting my Junie." "You think he ain't sincere," Tobias said. "I know he ain't sincere." Amos spat into the dust. "He's a fortune hunter, plain and simple. He don't want her, he wants the land. Wants to add the Dry Hollow to his spread, and glory." The old man stopped, his jaw working. "Junie, she can't see it. She's too green, too soft. All that schooling rubbed the country sense right out of her. She looks at that smiling snake and she sees a gentleman." Tobias was quiet a moment. "What are you fixing to do about it?" "I don't rightly know yet," Amos muttered. "But I'll be hanged before I let some slicked-up money hunter Marry my girl and steal what's left of her birthright. I'll find a way. There's always a way. And in the dark bunkhouse, Wyatt Calder lay very still, listening, and thinking about the way Junie Hollister had lifted her chin against the world that morning, soft. The old man had called her soft and green. Wyatt wasn't so sure about that at all. He got his proof not 3 days later. A late spring storm came rolling down off Porcupine Ridge that afternoon. The kind that turns a dry wash into a roaring river in the space of a few minutes. The kind that catches the careless and the green flat-footed. Wyatt was up in the high pasture riding fence, his collar turned against the rain, when he heard it over the wind. A thin, sharp, frightened cry. He turned his horse toward the sound and pushed through the brush to the Swolselen Creek. A young calf had gone down into the flooded water. The current had it pinned against a half-submerged snag, and the mud and the rising water had it trapped fast, and on the far bank the mother cow was bawling and stamping, helpless to reach it, and there, already off her horse, already in the water up to her waist, with her fine Eastern clothes soaked through and clinging and ruined past saving, was Junie Hollister. She had managed to get a loop of rope around the calf's neck and one foreleg, and she was hauling on it with everything she had. Her braids come loose and plastered across her face, her teeth gritted hard, her arms shaking with the strain, her boots slipping in the mud. "Hold on!" Wyatt shouted. He was off his horse and crashing into that cold, rushing water before she even knew he'd come. He got his shoulder against the calf and his hands on the rope above hers, and together they heaved. Once, twice. On the third pull, the mud gave up its hold all at once, and the calf came free, scrambling and kicking up the bank, where it wobbled on shaky legs, and then bawled and ran straight to its mother. Junie stood there in the thigh-deep water, gasping for breath, mud to her elbows, her hair a wreck and her city clothes destroyed. And she laughed, a real laugh. Breathless and bright and full of pure relief, like something that had been locked in a cage finally got let out into the air. Then she saw him watching her, and the laugh died in her throat, and the chin came up, and the cold, proud mask dropped back over her face like a curtain. "I suppose," she said, lifting her dripping chin, "you'll go and tell my father that the useless dude girl was out playing in the creek, ruining her fancy clothes." Wyatt waded over and held out a steady hand to help her up the slippery bank. "No, Mom," he said quietly. "I'll tell him you saved one of his calves that nobody else was around to save, and that you did it better and braver than half the men on this outfit would." She didn't take his hand right away. She stood there in the rain, water streaming down her face, studying him like she was trying to decide if he was making sport of her. "Why would you say that?" she said at last. "It wasn't quite a question, because it's true. Most of the hands here," she said slowly, "look at me like I'm a fool in a costume. Most of the hands here," Wyatt said, "ain't paying attention." He kept his hand out. "I am." After a long moment, she took it. Her fingers were cold and trembling, and her grip was stronger than he'd expected. He pulled her up the bank. And they stood there together in the pouring rain, both of them soaked through and grinning like idiots over one saved calf. And for the first time since Junie Hollister had come home, somebody had looked at her plain and clear and seen who she truly was. After that, they took to riding together in the evenings, when the work was done, and the light went long and gold across the range. It started with small things. He'd be sitting by the corral mending a bridle, and she'd come out quiet with 2 tin cups of coffee and hand him one without a word. He'd show her how to read the weather in the look of the western sky, how to tell when the grass was going sour, how to gentle a spooked horse using nothing but a slow, steady hand and a low, patient voice. He had a gift with horses, and she watched him work with a wonder she didn't try to hide. And she showed him things too. She told him about the books she'd read, the great gray ocean she'd stood beside back east and wept over because it made her so homesick for the dry brown hills. She talked of cities full of more people than there were cattle in the whole territory, of music and lamplight and a loneliness so deep among all those strangers that some nights she'd thought she would die of it. "They think I came back ruined," she told him one evening, sitting on the top rail of the corral with the sun going down red and enormous behind the ridge. "My father most of all. He looks at me like I broke a promise to him just by changing." She turned the cooling coffee in her hands. "But I learned things out there, Wyatt. Real things. I learned bookkeeping and figures and how mortgages and interest work. I learned exactly how men like Leif Skinner make their money, off other people's bad luck and bad arithmetic. I've tried 3 times to sit my father down and show him how to fight Skinner's note. He won't hear a word of it. To him, I'm still a child who went off and put on airs." Wyatt was quiet a while, watching the light fade off the hills. "Your father's a scared man," he said finally. "And scared men don't listen good. They get to clutching at what they think they know, and they go deaf to everything else. Don't mean he don't love you, Junie. Means he loves you so hard and so clumsy he can't see straight." She looked at him sidelong. "You talk like a man who's known a few scared men. I've known a few." "And what about you?" she asked. The question was soft, but her eyes were sharp on his face. "What are you scared of?" Wyatt called her. "A man doesn't drift from outfit to outfit, never saying where he comes from or where he's bound, never letting a single soul get close unless he's running hard from something. So which is it? The law? A woman? A debt?" Wyatt looked out at the dimming land and turned his own cup slowly in his hands. There was a great deal he could have told her, right then. The truth was sitting right there in his chest, aching to get out, but he found he couldn't say it. Not yet. Not while there was any chance she'd look at him different for it. Look at him the way the whole world had always looked at her, seeing the costume instead of the person underneath. So he said nothing at all, but he reached over just once, slow and careful, and tucked a loose strand of golden hair back behind her ear. And Junie Hollister, who had built her walls so high and held her chin so proud, did not pull away. What Wyatt didn't tell her, what he hadn't told a living soul in over a year, was that he was no saddle tramp at all. His real name was known across 3 states, but not the way a man would ever want it known. His father had owned the better part of 500,000 acres of prime grazing land up in Montana, a cattle empire built over 40 hard years. And when the old man finally died, every foot of it had come down to Wyatt, his only son. He could have lived soft as a banker the rest of his natural days and never lifted a finger. Instead, he'd done a thing that made his father's old partners shake their heads and call him a fool. He'd left it all behind. He'd put on the most worn-out clothes he could find, saddled a plain horse, and gone drifting, hiring on at little half-broke failing outfits across the territory, the lowest hand on the totem pole, working for $30 a month, and found. Because he'd wanted, just once in his life, to learn the cattle business honest, from the bottom rail up, the way a real cowman learned it through blistered hands and broken sleep. Not the way a rich man's son had it handed to him on a silver platter. And because, somewhere down deep, he'd wanted to know if anybody in this world could ever like him for himself alone, and not for the thing his father had left behind. He'd gotten his wish at Dry Hollow Ranch. Nobody here knew him for anything but a quiet, capable drifter with a good hand for horses. He just hadn't counted on falling so deep in love with a girl everybody else had thrown away. It all came apart on a gray Tuesday. Wyatt was out by the corral saddling up to ride into Red Fork Crossing. He'd told the foreman he was drawing his month's wages and moving on, though that was a lie now, for he had no intention of leaving anything but his old life behind. He was cinching his horse when old Amos Hollister's voice came carrying sharp across the yard, full of a plan so ugly it stopped Wyatt's hands cold on the latigo. "You drive them cattle into the Badlands tonight," Amos was telling Tobias, the two of them standing close by the bunkhouse, not seeing the new hand frozen in the shadow of the barn. "Every last head we got left, and while you're at it, you light the powder I got planted at the dam on Wildcat Creek. Blow her wide open. Let the water run back the other way, down the far side of the ridge, the way it ran before I ever diverted it." Tobias's jaw had dropped near to his chest. "Amos, Milt. Amos, you've gone clean off your head. Blow the dam? That water's the life of this whole valley. That's the point of it, man," the old man hissed. "Don't you see? You'll spread it around that some masked rider done it, a black ghost, riding down off the ridge, running off the stock and blowing the dam. Make it look like rustlers, like the dry hollow's been hit and ruined and there's nothing left. But why? Why would you wreck your own outfit? Because..." Amos's voice cracked with a kind of desperate cunning. "If the ranch is busted, flat broke, dried up, worth nothing but dust and debt, then that smooth dude Mosvale drops my Junie so fast, it'll spin her pretty head clean around. He's a fortune hunter, Tobias. There's no fortune left. There's no hunter. He'll be gone with the morning wind, and my girl'll be safe from him. I'm doing it to save her. I'm doing it for Junie." Wyatt stood rooted in the barn shadow, his blood gone to ice. The old fool was going to burn his own daughter's whole future to the ground. He was going to destroy her inheritance, her home, the only stretch of ground on this earth she had ever loved, and he was going to do it, telling himself the whole while that it was an act of love. Scared men don't listen good, Wyatt had told her by the corral, but this was a long way past scared. This was a man about to murder the very thing he was trying to protect, and call it kindness. And Junie didn't know one word of it. Wyatt rode into Red Fork Crossing that night, but not to draw his wages and drift on. He went straight to the courthouse, and then to the bank, and he sat down behind closed doors, and did several quiet things, speaking, for the first time in over a year, a name he had not let cross his lips since the day he'd ridden away from Montana. He laid down money. He signed papers in a strong, sure hand. He filed claims. And he made certain arrangements with Leif Skinner himself that left that greasy moneylender looking like a man who'd just been handed a winning hand and lost the game anyway. By the time the sun came up the next morning, the whole town of Red Fork Crossing was buzzing like a kicked hive about a mysterious raid out at the Hollister place. A masked rider, folks said. A black ghost come down off Porcupine Ridge. A stolen herd, a dynamited dam, the dry hollow finished. Pauses were already forming up. Hard-eyed men were riding out toward the Badlands with rifles across their saddles. And out at the ranch, old Amos Hollister sat on his porch in the morning light, looking grimly, secretly satisfied. Certain his scheme had worked exactly as he'd planned it. He was wrong about nearly everything because his daughter had figured the whole thing out. Junie had grown up on that ranch, every gully and gap of it. She knew where her father kept his blasting powder, and she'd noticed it gone from the shed. She knew the trails, and she knew that not a single rider had gone out through that gap who hadn't belonged to the dry hollow. By the time the sun was high, she had pieced together every ugly inch of her father's plan. And then she'd done the one thing not a soul in that valley expected of the spoiled, soft, citified dude girl. She'd taken the herd her father thought was being scattered to the Badlands, and with quiet, hard riding she'd hazed it instead into a hidden pocket canyon on the good grass, where it would feed and hold safe. She'd gathered up the cattle everyone believed were lost. And then she'd ridden to the dam herself, and with her own steady hands she'd lit the fuse, not to ruin the dry hollow, to save it from the man who was trying to destroy it. The reckoning came in the ranch yard the next afternoon, with half of Red Fork Crossing crowded in to watch. Cyrus Mosvale arrived first, riding in on his blooded bay in a pressed shirt with that creamery cat smile fixed on his pale face, until Junie came down off the porch steps and looked him dead in the eye, and the smile faltered. "You rode over to buy my father's mortgage from Leif Skinner," she said, and her voice carried clear across the silent yard. "You meant to hold it over us, to put me in your debt so deep I'd have no choice, to make me grateful so I'd say yes when you asked. That was the whole of your courting. Wasn't it, Mr. Mosvale? You were never courting me at all. You were buying a ranch, and I came with the deed." Mosvale's smile guttered out like a candle in the wind. "Miss Hollister, I assure you, I only ever wished to be of help to your family in its hour of. I don't need that kind of help," she said. And she said it like a door closing. "I never have, and I never will." Old Amos came charging out of the house then, fists balled and mustache bristling, ready to throw the smooth-talking dude clear off his land at last. But before he could swing, a quiet, level voice cut through the crowd and stopped him flat. "Easy there, Amos." It was Wyatt, only he didn't look like any saddle tramp now. He'd shaved clean, and he stood tall in good dark clothes, and there was something in the set of his shoulders and the calm in his gray eyes that made the whole noisy yard go still and quiet. "The Dry Hollow mortgage is paid off," Wyatt said into that silence. "Every last cent of it. Leif Skinner's got his money in full, and he's got no more claim on 1 foot of this ground. Not now, not ever." He paused, letting it settle. "And the valley land east of Porcupine Ridge, the good grass, twice the grazing this old ranch ever had, that's bought and filed at the county seat, too." Another pause. "In Junie Hollister's name, hers alone." Amos's mouth opened and shut. No sound came out of it. When he finally found his voice, it came in a cracked whisper. Who in tarnation are you, mister? Where'd a 30-a-month saddle bum lay hands on that kind of money?" Junie was staring at Wyatt now, and her eyes had gone bright and wet, and a slow understanding was breaking across her face like sunrise. "Tell him," she said softly. "Tell them all who you really are, Wyatt." So he told them. He stood there in the middle of that crowded yard, and he told them about Montana, and the 500,000 acres, and the cattle empire his father had built. He told them about the rich man's son, who'd grown sick of being liked for his money, who'd thrown it all over and gone drifting in worn-out clothes to learn the trade honest, and find out if anyone could ever care for the plain man underneath. He told them every bit of it, holding nothing back this time, and then he turned to Junie, and the whole crowd seemed to lean in close to hear what he'd say. "I bought that valley with a little piece of my own money," he said, and his voice had gone rough at the edges. "But I'm not keeping a foot of it. I'm turning every acre of it back to you, Junie, whether you'll have me alongside it or not. Because a woman who will throw herself into a flood to save a calf nobody asked her to save, a woman who will outsmart a whole valley and save her own home when her own father gave up on it, that is not a spoiled city girl." He had to stop and steady himself. "That's the bravest, finest, truest person I ever met in my life, and every last soul standing in this yard was too blind to see it. I saw it the first morning I rode in. I've seen nothing else since. For a long moment, not one person in that yard so much as breathed. Then old Amos Hollister sat down hard on his own porch step and put his weathered face in his hands and shook his head slow. "Dang my time," he muttered through his fingers. All this while I was scheming and lying and near to wrecking everything to save her. And the only fella in this whole country who ever once saw my girl clear and true was the one ragged drifter I'd pegged for nothing at all. They were married that fall when the cottonwoods along Wildcat Creek had turned to gold, and the air came sharp and clean off the ridge in the mornings. The dam was rebuilt stronger than before, and the water ran clear and steady down into Saddle Creek Valley again, and the new grazing land east of Porcupine Ridge filled up by spring with fat, contented cattle. Tobias Reed stayed on as foreman and grinned about the whole affair like a man who'd half known how it would all shake out from the very start. And old Amos. Well, Amos got used to having a rich son-in-law a good deal faster than he ever let on. He took to sitting on his porch in the long evenings, watching his daughter ride out across her own land on a proper western saddle now, her golden hair loose and streaming in the wind, laughing that bright, caged bird laugh that didn't have anything to hide behind anymore. One such evening, Tobias came up onto the porch and found the old man quietly wiping at his eyes. "You all right there, Amos?" "Fine, fine." Amos cleared his throat gruffly and looked away. "Just thinkin', is all." He was quiet a spell, watching the two riders out in the gold light. Everybody in this whole valley called that girl spoiled, useless, a dude in a costume, her own father loudest of all, God forgive me. And one ragged, no-account drifter took one look at her and saw a queen. He shook his gray head slowly. "Makes a man wonder." Tobias, makes a man wonder how many good and worthy souls we throw clean away in this life, just on account of we never once bothered to truly look. Out across the gold-lit pasture, Junie reined up close beside her husband, and the two of them sat their horses there together, knee to knee, watching the great red sun go down over land that was theirs now, free and clear. She had stopped lifting her chin against the world. She didn't need to anymore, because the one person in all the world who mattered had seen her, truly seen her, all along. If this story touched your heart, let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more tales of the Old West, where the lonely find love, the overlooked are finally seen, and the heart always finds its way home.